What if I told you that the most powerful way to win an argument, to command a room, to dominate in life was to say nothing at all? That the deepest form of influence doesn't come from shouting louder, proving your point, or flexing your intellect, but from silent, unshakable presence. That's the paradox Friedrich Nietzsche understood better than anyone. And in a world obsessed with noise tweets, posts, reactions, his philosophy cuts through like a blade. Because Nietzsche didn't believe in domination through control. He believed in mastery of the self. And when you master yourself, you don't have to out-talk anyone, you out-exist them. This video is not about becoming passive. It's about becoming so powerful in your presence, your values, and your being that words become unnecessary. It's about learning the art of silent dominance, and Nietzsche is our guide. Because once you understand his philosophy, not just intellectually, but viscerally, you'll never need to prove yourself to anyone again.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's start with this question. Why do we feel the need to defend ourselves? Why do we explain, justify, argue, beg to be understood? Most of us do it out of fear of being misunderstood, dismissed, irrelevant. But Nietzsche would say, that fear is your cage. He saw through it. He understood that the strongest individuals aren't those who win debates, they're the ones who don't need to enter them. He called them the Übermensch, or overman beings who have transcended the herd mentality, who live by their own values, who don't seek validation because they embody it. The overman doesn't argue morality. He lives it. He doesn't demand respect. He radiates it. And that's where true dominance comes from, not from controlling others, but from becoming so deeply aligned with your own will that others feel your presence before you even speak. So ask yourself, have I been chasing approval when I could have been building presence? Have I been wasting energy on explaining myself when I could have been becoming someone who needs no explanation? Nietzsche's entire philosophy is a slap in the face to our modern obsession with being liked. He said, "You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, it does not exist." That's not relativism. That's power. It means stop fighting to be right. Start living what's right for you. And when you do that, when you embody your truth so fully that it no longer needs defense, you enter a different category of human existence. Let me give you the real-life metaphor. Have you ever been in a room where someone walks in and instantly changes the energy, not through words, but through presence? That's not charisma. That's alignment. That's someone who has done the inner work, who has faced the chaos within and come out the other side. Someone who doesn't need to dominate others because they've already dominated themselves. That is silent dominance. And Nietzsche believed that's where humanity must evolve, away from reaction, away from conformity, toward radical individuality, toward the will to power not over others but over the self. But what does that look like in practice? It means you stop explaining your decisions. You stop defending your taste, your identity, your vision. You stop needing to justify your silence. Because silence is often the loudest expression of strength. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That why is your center, your core, your personal code. And once you find it, you operate from a place of inner necessity, not outer pressure. Now here's a twist. Nietzsche wasn't a fan of comfort. In fact, he believed comfort was the enemy of greatness. He said, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." And that's not just about surviving pain. It's about transforming it, transmuting every insult, every failure, every moment of rejection into fuel. Think about that the next time someone disrespects you. Instead of reacting, ask, "Can I absorb this without losing myself? Can I turn this into power rather than pain?" Because that's what the overman does. He doesn't avoid chaos. He uses it. He turns wounds into wisdom. He turns silence into strength. This is a hard truth. Most people overtalk because they understand themselves. They try to compensate for the lack of inner clarity with external noise. But Nietzsche would say become so clear, so self-contained, so internally aligned that your silence speaks louder than their shouting. That's not arrogance. That's sovereignty. And it's rare, because it requires you to break free from the herd, to stop needing permission, to walk alone. Nietzsche said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." So ask yourself, am I ready to stop explaining and start embodying? Let's take a step back. Why does silence make people uncomfortable? Because silence cannot be controlled. It forces reflection. It exposes insecurity. It's a mirror. And most people aren't ready to face themselves. So when you choose silence not from retreat but from power, you disrupt the social script. You stop playing their game. And now they are the ones who feel uncertain, not because you attacked them, but because you didn't need to. Nietzsche's idea of the will to power isn't about domination in the traditional sense. It's about creation. It's about turning your life into a work of art. And what does an artist do? They don't explain their painting. They paint. They don't beg for applause. They create. That's how you win without words. You let your being say everything. You become so undeniably you that the world has no choice but to adapt. But this comes with a cost. Nietzsche paid it. He was ridiculed, dismissed, misunderstood. And yet, he kept writing, kept thinking. He kept standing in his truth, because he understood that the path of silent dominance is lonely, but it's real. It's the only path where you are not a puppet of the crowd, but the sculptor of your soul. And that's the ultimate form of winning, not beating others, but becoming independent of them. So here's the challenge. In your next conflict, your next interaction, your next moment of doubt, resist the urge to explain. Say less. Align more. Instead of defending, demonstrate. Instead of reacting, reflect. Instead of shouting, embody. And watch what happens. Watch how the energy shifts. Watch how people lean in. Watch how your silence becomes a force they can't ignore. Nietzsche didn't want followers. He wanted creators, people who live from the inside out, people who don't need to be understood because they understand themselves. And that's what you can become, not by copying him, but by becoming yourself so fully that no one else's opinion matters. That's the revolution. That's the power. That's how you win without saying a word. What does it mean to truly transcend the need for approval? To walk into a room and not wonder what people think of you. And to act not for praise, not to be accepted, not to be applauded, but because your actions are aligned with your inner necessity. That's Nietzsche's real message. That's the will to power. And the power he speaks about isn't control over others, It's control over yourself, over your impulses, over your neediness, over your craving to be seen. When you no longer need approval, you become unstoppable, not because you've conquered the world, but because you've conquered the part of you that needs the world. Let's be honest, most of us live in quiet slavery to other people's opinions. We shape our words, curate our images, even shrink our dreams based on what we think will be acceptable. Nietzsche would call that herd morality the invisible cage we build around ourselves to stay safe. But safety isn't strength. Comfort isn't freedom. And silence, when it comes from fear, is not power. So here's the twist. Silence only becomes dominance when it comes from sovereignty. When you are silent, not because you're scared, but because you simply don't need to speak to prove who you are. Nietzsche's Übermensch, the Overman, isn't some comic book hero. It's the version of you that has stopped asking, "Am I enough?" and started saying, "This is who I am." No apology, no performance, just truth. But that truth is earned. It's forged in solitude, or in suffering, in struggle. Because before you can transcend the need for approval, you have to see how much of your life is built on it. You have to ask yourself some brutally honest questions. How much of what I do is actually for me? How much is just a performance to avoid rejection? And what would I do differently if I truly didn't care what anyone thought? That's not a rhetorical question. Sit with it. Let it haunt you. Because when you finally peel away the layers of social conditioning, when you strip yourself of the masks you've worn for love, success, and validation, you might find something terrifying: emptiness. And Nietzsche would say, good. That's where it begins. That's where you start. Because only when you've faced the void inside you without distraction, without denial, can you begin to fill it with something real. Not noise, not approval, but will. The will to power is the will to create yourself, to become who you are, not who you were told to be. And that process is painful. It requires death, the death of your comfort, the death of your ego, the death of the version of you that was built to please others. But in that death, something is born. It's a self that doesn't need to dominate with force, because it dominates with presence. A self that doesn't argue, because it is the argument. Or a self that doesn't conform, because it's too busy becoming. Let me ask you something radical. What if every time you spoke, you lost power? What if true strength means withholding your voice until it's forged in fire, until it carries the weight of truth, not insecurity? In a world where everyone is speaking, tweeting, reacting, what if you became the one who listens, who observes, who waits until the exact moment when your words will not just be heard, but felt? That's Nietzsche's ideal. Not the loudest in the room, but the one whose silence makes others question themselves. Not the one who wins arguments, but the one who makes arguments unnecessary. Because dominance doesn't come from volume, it comes from depth. From the depth of your self-knowledge, from the stillness of your convictions, from the fire that burns in you, whether people see it or not. But here's the catch. You can't fake this. You can't pretend to be sovereign. That's the great lie of the modern world, branding yourself as powerful while still being a slave to likes, comments, and clout. Nietzsche would tear through that illusion. He'd ask, what does your silence conceal? Is it fear? Or is it force? And if it's fear, he'd tell you to go into the wilderness of your mind, and to suffer, to confront your weakness, to endure solitude. And only then will your silence become strength. So how do you begin this transformation, this journey from needing approval to creating truth? You start by saying no, not to others, but to yourself. You say no to the part of you that wants to be liked. You say no to the part that wants to fit in. You say no to the voice that tells you to play small. And in that no, you create room for your yes, the yes that comes from your deepest instincts, the yes that is yours, not borrowed. The yes that doesn't need to be explained because it's embodied. This is the way of the silent dominant, the one who walks into chaos and remains untouched, the one who listens more than they speak, not because they are weak, but because they've already won. They've won the greatest war of all, the war against themselves. And once you've done that, nobody else can touch you. Not with insults, not with rejection, not even with praise. Because you are no longer moved by the winds of opinion. You have become the mountain. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are, not find who you are. Become." That means it's not about discovery. It's about creation. It's about choosing over and over to live from the deepest part of you, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when no one understands. Because that's where greatness lives. Not in the noise, but in the silence behind it. So the next time you feel the urge to speak, to defend, to prove, pause. Ask yourself, is this coming from power or from fear? And if it's fear, say nothing. Let the silence teach you. Let it reshape you. Let it burn away the parts of you that are still seeking permission. Because on the other side of that fire, there is a version of you that doesn't need to win, doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to be seen. They are the one who wins without words,